This is Jonathan Lane from Fan Film Factor, and today I am here with Glen L. Wolfe, the Wolf of Wolfe Reynolds Productions, and the writer and director of Voices from the Past, the latest offering from the Federation Files. So, Glen, welcome back again to Fan Film Factor.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jonathan. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure on my side, too, my friend. So, your latest production is... It's definitely a Star Trek fan film, but on the other hand, it's kind of not a Star Trek fan film because, ironically, you, who own one of the few TOS sets in the country and could film on the bridge of the Enterprise anytime you wanted to, have a fan film that has no scenes of anybody in a Starfleet uniform and has no scenes on any set and has really no actors playing characters from any of the series with two, I should say, notable exceptions, which we'll get to in a second. And this is probably a good time for me to say, folks, if you haven't watched it yet, it's up higher on the blog. Go and watch it because we are probably going to spoil it for you if you haven't.
Yeah, I agree. If we talk about it and you haven't seen it, it won't be as fun.
Yes, It's more surprising that way. So let's talk about, first of all, the conception of this. So you decided to create a Star Trek fan film that wasn't really a Star Trek fan film. How did that happen?
I just want to start out by saying what you say is exactly what I figured some of the fallback out of this would be, because, everyone, wants to, nitpick and criticize for whatever reason, and it doesn't bother me, just so you know. But, yeah, when we were shooting this, I told Dan, the first thing I'm going to hear is it's not a Star Trek fan film. But as you watch it, you'll realize why it is. And the conception of this, I actually wrote the basic outline for this a couple years ago in the anticipation of not being able to shoot on a set. We'll leave it at that. So, I wanted to keep making films, and I thought this would be a way to keep going while I built new sets and still be able to put a film out.
It's okay to talk about it. I mean, this was probably written at the time when you were having all the issues with Starbase Studios and the former sets that were in Oklahoma City and got moved to Arkansas and now are a thing of the past. But you have, just for people who don't know, you have created, you and Dan Reynolds, your partner, have recreated many, many sets from the original series. You've got a partial bridge set. You've got a sick bay set. I know that because we used it for Interlude. What else do you have, actually?
I'm completing the last wall on the conference room. We had about a three-quarters conference room. I'm working on the final wall with the view screen, actually, this week. We have about half as much corridor as the original set had, mainly because that's as long as my building is. And then we had put up a captain's quarters for another fan film series. It's not standing now because it was in we have an area where we put up temporary sets and we can take them down. I did keep the pieces so I could put it back up, but we do like to have an area where we can put in specific, sets for a specific story without having to go find another building. So,
gotcha.
So we do have captain's quarters. We have shuttlecraft. I think that covers it.
And some of this is in buildings that Dan owns, and some of this are in buildings that you own, correct?
Correct. The bridge set and shuttlecraft are in Harrison, and then the rest of the sets are in the Mountain Home area.
I gotcha. Are you guys planning on building any other sets in the future, or making new buildings so you can build more sets?
Without spoiling it, we're working on 2 reclamation projects right now, so there are going to be some other things built. Yes. But I don't want to go into detail at the moment.
But I won't press you because I know you like to keep your secrets.
Well, it's more so I don't want to be pressured to when you're going to get it done, more so than it's an actual secret. But
come on.
It's easier to work
never say when you're going to get it done. Come on.
Probably by July. We'll have another conversation about that when I get a little bit further along on it.
Oh, okay. July is cool. That's only 2 months away from this call, so...
Of course, the problem with that is now, starting May 1, I go back to work, not full-time, but full overtime, since they're releasing us to let us go do our jobs again.
You're in the medical profession, correct?
Yeah, I'm a biomedical engineer.
Okay. Yeah, well, then you should be back to work then.
I'm not sure why I wasn't working, other than the places I go to work were closed.
So there you go. I'm guessing in the biomedical industry that, you actually have proper masks and other safety equipment, right?
Oh yeah. And actually the company I work for, we just gave away 2,000 masks to the public in Mountain Home as a, a gesture of goodwill for the community.
Oh, that's very nice of you guys.
Yeah, and I guess since I said I should say I work for a company called DR Met. It's
DR what?
DRMET. DR Met. It's the founder's initials, so other than people's names being in there, that it doesn't stand for anything else. But it's a biomedical service company out of Fayetteville.
Gotcha. Okay, well then let's go back to Voices from the Past and discuss a little bit. So you wrote it a couple of years ago. When did you guys film it?
We filmed it a couple months ago, right before things started shutting down. So we actually were shooting during, theoretically, that pandemic. So our last shot was the first scene in the film, which, of course, had the most people in it, which was kind of odd that our last shot, we had more than 10 people, and then they started quarantining like the day after we shot. But, yeah, the first scene was the last scene shot, and that was shot less than a month ago.
Oh, I didn't realize it was so recent. And I'm guessing you shot all of it, locally there in Arkansas, right?
Yes. It's based in New York City. Dan has access to, all kinds of canned footage, different places that we can, grab and use. So the New York City shots, we did not fly up there and do those. Those were free to use for giving credit for the person that shot them.
Because I know that there's at least one or two office scenes where you can look out the window and see buildings. But are those buildings from a city in Arkansas, or are they something that you green screened in?
Well, in the office itself, that's green screen. Now, when you see the people walking outside of the office, that's all downtown Harrison.
I gotcha. And then, of course, you have intercut establishing shots of New York City. And you told me offline that those were shots that Dan just happened to have in his virtual closet.
There's lots of free footage that you can get from different people online, and Dan just knows how to search to find it. He didn't have them himself, but he, being in the television industry, he knows where to go to find stuff like that. And, in the ending credits, it doesn't say who did what shot, but, they let you use the shot if you give them credit at the end of the film. So Dan went to whatever his television sources are and said, I'm looking for New York City shots, and that's what we came up with.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I asked Glenn yesterday before we had this call if he could tell me where that shot in Manhattan on 10th Avenue was, because you can't see the cross street, and it just looks so darn familiar to me because I grew up in New York City.
Yeah, I think I've seen that in movies somewhere. When I saw it, too, I'm like, man, you didn't, take this out of a movie, did you? But of course we didn't. And oddly, if you really pay attention, I could tell you what the cross street in the show is, because when you see them coming into the building in the first scene there, when the young girl's bringing in the stuff to the detectives, the address of that building you can see on the window. So theoretically, they're at the corner of 10th and Rush Street, and I'm not even sure there would be a Rush Street in Manhattan, to be honest. So there might be a glitch in the movie right there.
Yeah, there's not a Rush Street, not that intersects 10th. Actually, the reason that I was so curious is that it looked like the shot of 10th Avenue was either 96th Street or 86th Street on the Upper West Side, possibly 72nd Street, and people who live in New York or Manhattan would know what I'm talking about because those are the two little streets. But where those happen, because you can sort of see Central Park in the background, kind of, but where those happen, 10th Avenue has already become Amsterdam Avenue. It's renamed. So I was like, I was literally going. So I was going to Google Earth, and I was going to Google Street Map, and I was literally driving up 10th Avenue between where it starts, which is in Greenwich Village, and where it turns into Amsterdam, which is about 59th Street or 60th Street or so. And I kept looking north at each turn, and there was nothing that matched that, and it was just confounding me. So, I'll see if Dan can find out, but I'm guessing if it was just stock footage, they probably don't know either.
Yeah, unless the scene was labeled with the street name, he probably doesn't know either. But it's funny that, people will recognize, especially if they're from New York or from New York, they probably know where that was shot. But they said it's stock footage that, was free for public use. So I'd love to have went up and shot it myself, but then I think getting permits to shoot in New York probably be a problem.
Well, it actually depends where you are. I mean, some of those shots, could have been out any office window, which in case is, free to shoot in New York. But,
True.
I think that 10th Avenue one, there's no way that was done out of a window because you're in the middle of 10th Avenue.
Yeah, it looks like the middle of the street. So,
yeah,
a little note on our shooting of this one. We have a drone. This is the first episode that we've used the drone in, but we've had a drone for a couple of years. We just have not had the right shot to make it make sense to use it.
And if you haven't watched it yet, folks, the drone was used in that very, very first scene that you see in the first, 10 or 20 seconds. And it was kind of funny, as I was watching that first scene, I was thinking, this needs to exist in the past, because I had no idea what it's about yet.
Right.
Because, there's cars in the shot. And I know that, some fan filmmakers don't mind, seeing 21st century automobiles in the future, but I know you guys are kind of careful about things like that. So, I'm seeing a regular car, people are kind of, standing in front of it, and I'm like, okay, so this is probably not in the future, and I kind of went with it. And then, of course, as things unfold, and this is sort of the brilliance of the fan film, as things unfold, you pretty much touch on as many different Star Trek incursions into the 20th and potentially 21st centuries. I mean, I was trying to think, did you miss any?
If I did, it was unintentional, because I did try to hit everyone. I watched every episode where they went back in time, and, of course, made sure that when they went back to the future, it didn't then erase the episode, which the assignment Earth, not assignment Earth, Tomorrow's Yesterday, it was hard to really refer to that and give it much credit in the film, because they beamed him back into his Air Force jet seconds after he saw the ship, so I couldn't expand on that too much because everything after that didn't happen.
Yeah, and of course, the big question from that episode is, did the images of the Enterprise still exist? Because when they went back in time, did they erase themselves from beaming him out of the jet and putting the tractor beam on, in which case he wouldn't have pictures of them? And then I decided, I'm not going to harp on that, because,
please ask, because I have the answer to that.
Oh, okay, because I wasn't going to harp on it, because I was like, okay, you know what, Glen's my buddy, and,
nope.
I'm not the kind of person to, berate fan filmmakers, because you guys try really, really, really hard. So I wasn't going to make a thing out of it, but okay, let's hear your explanation of why there is a shot of the Enterprise from the wing of
it makes
Captain
perfect sense. Because, and I researched that very hard, because I knew that would be a question that, if not you asked, somebody would point out, wait a minute, that episode really didn't exist, so they wouldn't have anything. I watched the episode several times and went through, and he never says when he turned his wing cameras on. He does, when they beam him back, however, say he saw the ship. So since they never said when the wing cameras came on, he could have put them on at takeoff, as soon as he got to altitude, whenever. So since they did not specify, okay, I'm turning on the cameras, we don't know when he turned them on. So I went with, he turned them on as soon as he cleared the runway.
Well, there you go. And I guess the other thing is that they beamed him out when they put the tractor beam on, and I think the idea from the episode, granted it was, 1967, 1960, or 1966, 67 when they wrote it, and, they weren't really thinking really clearly as writers. They were trying to produce, an episode, every 8 days or so.
Yep.
But the really big question is, the Enterprise suddenly disappears. We have Captain Christopher saying that, it's gone, like it was never here. But it had to have been there up until that moment, or else there was no reason for him to have been scrambled. He wouldn't have even been in the air if suddenly they erased the existence of them having ever come back in time and been in the lower atmosphere.
Right. And if you watch the last scene, when he beams back in, he says, I saw it, and then he says it just disappeared. So he actually, at the end of the episode, does say he had visual contact after he was beamed back.
So it doesn't stand to reason that there wouldn't be a photo,
Correct.
At least one, slightly blurry photo of the Enterprise, and, one that could be cleaned up as best that they could in, 1966.
Right, because in the last scene, they said, just chalk it up as another UFO sighting.
Yep, so that kind of works. Let me ask a question for you, because it wasn't clear to me. The guy who's in prison
Yep.
that your sleuth, your Scully character meets, who is he?
The actor, or who was he playing?
No, who character was he playing? We'll talk about actors later.
Well, he is playing the guy when Enterprise went back. He was the guy kidnapping people to get all the blood types for the Xindi, who were going to then have biological warfare on us. This happened in Detroit.
That's why
it was called Carpenter's.
Okay, the reptile guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that was all about the Xindi.
Yes, and his last name. He was credited
Enterprise.
with the last name of Loomis. I had to create a first name for him. So.
Well, you're allowed to do that.
Sure.
And actually, speaking of creating names, I actually had to. It was at the very beginning when you were still talking about Little Green Men, the episode from Deep Space Nine.
Yep.
That I went to look up the name that had been mentioned. That was when I first started to suspect that you're playing off of Little Green Men.
Yep.
That I went to look up the name Jeff Carlson, because I couldn't remember the name from the episode, so I just Googled Jeff Carlson in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and what I ended up seeing was that particular character wasn't named in the episode, but he was named in the script, and that's what Memory Alpha listed him as.
Yep.
So once I knew that, I was like, oh, how interesting. And, once I knew you were, doing Little Green Men, I was just like, okay, are they just going to be following up the Roswell Little Green Men thing, or are we going to be seeing some other things? And as I was watching it and things just continued to develop, it was, trying to stay one step ahead of you of saying, okay, well, what's the next thing that they can put in there? And that's the fun of the episode. It's like, okay, obviously, they go back in Assignment Earth, and they go back in Tomorrow Is Yesterday, and they go back in City on the Edge of Forever. And, how are you going to get that in there? And you do it all brilliantly, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. How'd you like the opening ship on the opening titles?
That was, if I remember correctly, a DY-100 class or 500?
Correct. 100.
And that's true, because in the Federation files, which are an anthology series, you always have potentially a different ship there, because you're always, it's an anthology theory, so you're always going to be, talking about a different starship. So, yes, I like that. Only to the point where it's like, okay, are we, I'm trying to figure out what year we're in, because the DY...
And if you remember,
500,
that launched in 96. So it took everything in my power not to try to put some con stuff in, but that wasn't the story I was trying to tell, because we're actually currently living in post-eugenic wars right now.
Yeah, World War III was tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hated that.
But I guess I can give you a teaser. We're doing a follow-up, and there'll be a character that you may be aware of who wears a red jumpsuit, who was alive at this time, will show himself in the next episode.
Oh. Is he named after a brand of hot dog?
A color. He's named after a color.
Oh, he's named there. Oh, then I know which red jumpsuit we're talking about.
Now, I'm not going to release that episode next, because I don't want to bring the Federation files into a, we'll say, non-Star Trek film kind of series, because, like I said earlier, some people are going to consider this not really a Star Trek film. So we will release another ship-based film before that episode, but I'm already in shooting a follow-up to this one.
Now, is it an actual follow-up sequel, like having direct ties into this one?
It will have, the investigators will be the same, and some of the actors will be the same, but without revealing too much, they'll actually be different people, and we'll find out maybe next year why they all look the same.
Okay, well, that'll be interesting. So let's talk about your actors for a little bit. This was shall we say, a more meaty Star Trek fan film, in that a lot of it is carried primarily by two actors. So how did you find these people?
Buddy, who's the star of the episode, along with Caitlin. Actually, Caitlin had more lines, so I consider Caitlin the star. But Buddy has been with me since his name is Mud. When we were putting Mud together, he volunteered. He worked as a grip and stuff. He works as an actor part-time down here in Arkansas, and every episode that comes out, he wants to be a part of. And I did tell him, just hang on. When I have the right role for you, I definitely will get you in, because we do try to typecast to make sure that things look right. So I wasn't going to make him the captain or something, because he's a little bit bigger guy. But when I was writing this one, I actually was trying. You mentioned Scully earlier. I was actually thinking of X-Files when I wrote this, but did not want to be government connected. So I actually went back to the Rockford Files to base my investigators on. So he's kind of a Jim Rockford investigator, and as I'm writing it, I'm thinking this is the role I want Buddy to do. So, like I said, he's been with me for quite a while. I met Caitlin on a casting call. She's been in 3 things I've shot. I don't know if any of them are up, because I shoot for other people. Like, I think she's going to end up being in Yorktown. I can't remember what else I've shot her in, but she's been in 3 or 4 shoots that I've done already. So when I was writing this, I had to try out for this role, and they knew each other, so they played well off of each other. So that's how I cast Caitlin off of playing off of Buddy.
And by the way, for anybody who is too young to know what the Rockford Files is, you can just go Google it.
Well, I would think most of the Star Trek audience probably is old enough to know what that is. But yeah, Rockford.
We are an aging group, aren't we? Yes. Yeah, I remember the Rockford Files.
Yeah, Jennifer Garner's father, right?
Yes. Yeah, I just sort of remember the tune.
Yeah.
Was that it?
It sounds pretty close, yeah. And the reason I went that route, because I didn't want everything to be so sterile. Like if you look at the office floors and stuff, they're not vacuumed. We have dead leaves on the floor. That was actually planned, because we didn't want it to be the sterile FBI office. This is almost Inspector Clouseau-ish. We want them to be
they're
smart but
shoes.
bumbling.
You've got to have the gum on the shoe to be a gumshoe.
Yeah. So that a lot of those things that look like mistakes, believe me, were not. We even had, I don't know if you picked up on it, we even had Buddy say the wrong year when he was talking about one of the incidents.
I noticed that, 1967. He should have said 1968.
Yep.
So why didn't you fix that?
It was actually planned. So.
Oh, it was planned?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Yeah. We wrote it in there just like we had him say Ferengi wrong. That was a plan. It wasn't. Oops. We messed that up. That was actually planned.
Oh. Well, I'm kind of curious. Why was it planned for him to say 1967 when the episode took place in 1968?
Well, just to show that they're fallible.
Gotcha.
He's not recalling it correctly. He opens the file up and thinks he knows what it says, so he doesn't read the file. He just says the date. And other places in the episode he says the date right. So that's kind of the thing. It's not that we got all the dates wrong, just that his memory is not exactly what he thinks it is.
I gotcha.
And
yeah, I
and
thought
when the follow-up episode comes out, there'll be another big thing that will accentuate that.
Ah, I gotcha.
He's not Mulder. He doesn't have a photographic memory. He's a gumshoe, and he's trying his best, but he's definitely fallible. And like I said, that was intentionally done that way.
So the other question about this episode is obviously there was, a lot of meat in this episode. I mean, first of all, and we'll talk about this in a second, it goes over the 30-minute limit set by the guidelines. Like it's 38 minutes. You have not been sued. How about that? But there's obviously a lot to do, and I'm sure, he was director and as Dan is editor, I'm sure you had potentially a much longer film that you could have done and probably got it down to that. So there was a lot of footage that needed to be created.
Yes, and me and Dan discussed that many times as we were looking at cuts. And, we finally said we can't get it down to 30. If we get it down to 30, you have to cut so much out that it's not going to make any sense. Because this could have easily been 75 minutes.
Wow.
We're trying our best to not, rattle anybody's cages or anything. So it's as tight as we could get it. And hopefully CBS understands. And as we discussed earlier, not quite a Star Trek film. So We'll see. If they say something, we may have to try to cut it down, but I don't know where we can take something out.
Well, first of all, I think it's very difficult to argue that this is too easily confused with the Star Trek films.
Yeah, definitely. No one's going to look at this and think this is a Star Trek film. Absolutely correct.
Yeah, I mean, at worst, you've got drawings of Spock and Kirk, pinned to a wall, and they're pencil drawings, but, you never say Vulcan, you say Ferengi wrong.
And just so you know, about the drawings, in case it comes up at all, the drawings we made, we also used cosplayers. We did not use Nimoy or Shatner. You may recognize the good picture of Spock is, my Spock cosplayer, Mr. Forrest.
Yes, Paul Forrest, the very, very tall Mr. Spock.
Yes.
I actually owe Paul Forrest money. Did you know that?
No, what'd you do, lose a bet?
No, it was, there was a convention. It was actually Jaden's very first, I think he was like 5 years old. It was his first convention at all. And we were at back then it was called Stan Lee's Kamikaze. It's now the LA Comic-Con. And I had Jaden dressed in his red security shirt, which was actually more of an engineering shirt, because Scotty was his favorite character at the time. And we run into Paul, dressed as Spock and taking pictures with folks. And there was also a person with him who was dressed as Kirk. And I asked if Jaden could, get a picture with the two of them. And in doing this, Paul knelt down because Jaden would have, just been at Paul's calf level at that point. Paul's very tall.
Right.
And anyways, I have this great picture of Jaden as Scotty with, Kirk and Spock. And it wasn't until later that I found out that actually Paul charges for those photos. And I never paid him. And, it's now almost 5 years later, and I'm just like, oh, dear, I still owe him money. So if you see him, tell him I've got his $5 for him.
Yeah, I talk to him every once in a while, but I think he does compound interest, too, just so you know.
Oh, God. I got his $6 for him.
There you go.
Anyway, but yeah, so, I don't think CBS is going to really mind this one. I think that they're, more concerned about the Axanars and the Renegades and the Star Trek Continues and the ones that look much closer to real Star Trek. And the fact is you're close to a half an hour. You tried your best. And
yeah, I did. And we're having fun, and, we've never done a fundraiser. We're not out there hurting them monetarily in any way. And like you said, no one's going to turn this on and think this is a CBS product. So I'm reasonably certain that we're okay.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be the one that they make an example out of, honestly.
I hope not, because I do want to make a few more.
I think it'll be fine, And let's face it, there have been some filmmakers who have regularly gone over the 30-minute limit, including Starship Antilles and Quark's Bar. That one had hour-long episodes. And even Sam Cockings, when he did Star Trek Temporal Anomaly, which was filmed back in 2013, so he sort of predated the guidelines, but it didn't come out until 2019. And at that point, he was contacted by CBS, but he chatted with them, and he was very respectful. And ultimately, they said, look, you have to pull out the Star Trek music, and you can't use any shots of Patrick Stewart and Jonathan Frakes and Michael Dorn, but we will allow you to go over the 30-minute limit.
CBS has been reasonable with the ones they've talked to, I believe. Other than, the Axanar thing that went on, I think the other people who've been contacted that I know of, it wasn't a big bullying situation. It's just like, kind of do this and we'll let you go.
Yeah. And I think on CBS's side, it's a combination of, one, cover your ass. The folks in licensing don't want to be suddenly called up by somebody higher up on the food chain saying, why is this out there?
Right.
So if something looks like the Vulcan scene of Axanar, that's going to get a call. If something looks like Starship Antilles or one of the Constar Chronicles or whatever, I don't think anybody from upstairs is going to be calling down to the licensing department. So there's that. And I think, another part of it, I wouldn't call it laziness so much as busyness.
Yeah.
Any time that licensing has to interact with a fan, that's time spent away from a money-making endeavor for CBS.
Yep. Yeah, that's costing you money one way or the other.
Yeah, and certainly if a lawyer gets involved, I mean, that's going to be an extra $500 an hour just for the lawyer to, write the letter saying, please cease and desist. So you'd better be sure that this Star Trek fan is producing something that could easily be confused with Star Trek in the marketplace. Otherwise, just, let the kids have their fun. That's my feeling.
And that, like I said, the people I know that have been contacted, it hasn't been where martial law. I think they've been reasonable.
Yeah, and I also think that that's mostly going to keep going now that the guidelines are in place and that most fan filmmakers are following them. I think that, if every fan filmmaker suddenly started, sticking their nose up at CBS and saying, we're not going to follow these anymore, and look, we are going to make George Takei play Sulu again because we just don't care, then obviously the hammer has to come down again, because that's the whole reason that the guidelines started in the first place, is that CBS was seeing not just Axanar, but Renegades and Star Trek Continues and New Voyages and, a whole bunch of these just coming out.
There was a lot of really good ones put out, and it's really when it started was because some of them could be looked at and go, wait a minute, is Star Trek back?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is not widely known, but it's becoming more and more widely known as more people talk about the origins of the Axanar case. Is one of the main reasons that Axanar was sued, rather than just being given a quiet cease and desist or anything like that, is that by the point that the lawsuit happened, CBS had now committed to do Discovery. And as you know, the plot of Discovery was going to be, it takes place 10 years before Captain Kirk, and there's a major war with the Klingons.
Yeah.
And Axanar was going to take place 20 years before Captain Kirk, and there's a major war with the Klingons. And once the Vulcan scene came out, it wasn't that they thought the quality was better. Everybody was like, they thought Axanar was going to be better than Star Trek, and they couldn't. No. CBS knew that their stuff was going to be better, but it was good enough that it could have caused confusion.
Sure.
And they were just worried that if somebody says, there's a new Star Trek about a war with the Klingons before Kirk, and they see Axanar for free online, the worry was they would stop there saying, I've just watched that new CBS Star Trek show for free. Why should I pay $6 a month to see it?
That does sound like it makes sense to me.
It's sort of the real reason that they came down as hard as they did, as opposed to simply calling up Alec and saying shut it down, which they could have done at any point.
Right.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with the Axanar coffee, and it really had little to do with the studio. But it was also, ultimately it was a mistake, because had they called Alec and said, you need to shut it down, or this is what we need to do in order to get this not to be as similar or whatever, Alec would probably have worked with them. I can't guarantee it, but, I don't think he wanted to piss anybody off, beyond how much he was already pissing people off. Because keep in mind that he did go to CBS on 4 different occasions and say, this is what we're doing, tell me if I can't do it. And they said, we can't tell you what you can and can't do, but if you cross the line, we'll let you know.
So, we'll tell you after you already messed up. Yeah.
Well, he figured that they would call him up and say, okay, you've crossed the line, please step back, as opposed to 2 days before New Year's sending him a lawsuit complaint. It was sort of like they launched the rocket rather than just doing a systems check.
Yeah.
Or they launched the nuclear warhead, rather than, trying diplomacy first. But anyway, exactly. But, all that aside, I don't think you're in any significant danger for your 38-minute fan film.
I would hope not. Because like I said, it's all in fun, and we tried as hard as we could to cut it as tight as we could. And, there's a problem, then we'll change it,
I have to say, by the way, it is a good, tight edit. Had this been 75 minutes long, I think it would have been way, way, way too long. I think that's true of a lot of Star Trek fan films. In that way, the guidelines actually saved a number of Star Trek fan productions from themselves.
I agree. And just to clarify the 75-minute, that was when I was contemplating some con stuff. So there was going to be one more piece of meat in there.
So a whole other plot point.
But I'm pleased with this edit. I think not having anything related to con in there at all worked out, other than if you have a really good high-definition TV and you really expand one scene. The magazine laying on the detective's desk is like a version of the National Enquirer, and on it says something about Khan escaping.
Okay, I'm going to have to go back and freeze frame it.
But I don't know if that will actually, because it's such a small piece on the film. But we did that in case anyone could actually read the magazine that was there. We did talk about Khan on the magazine.
Well, that's cool. So anyway, it sounds like this actually ended up happening pretty quickly. You filmed it, sounds like over the course of a few months, and
Yep.
Dan edited it pretty darn quickly then, huh?
Yeah, I think what really helps, other than Dan is really good at editing, is without having a lot of spaceship shots and a lot of green screen. The only green screen in it is the window in the office, and it's only one window in the office too. It's the window in the first office when the door opens. So that made it a lot easier to edit because not only editing, Dan does a lot of the special effects that are, Sam Cockings does my spaceships, but everything else Dan does. So it did help not having to spend, weeks and weeks, trying to, go frame by frame and do adjustments. So the editing went good. The acting was really, I thought, went well because having Buddy and Caitlin, who both are semi-professional actors, I guess I can say that, they act in other things. This wasn't their first rodeo, let's put it that way. So they knew their lines when they got there. The young girl I have playing Faith, knew her lines. She paid attention. She listened to directions. So all of the acting I was very, very happy with. We didn't do more than possibly 6 takes on any particular scene angle. So that went well.
So speaking of your female actors, there's a scene where she's sitting on an airplane, and is she on a real airplane? Did you actually go onto an airplane to film that shot?
We actually did not, and it slipped my mind earlier. That is the only other green screen shot in the film, but we actually shot her in an airline chair, and we were going to just CG the background of it, and then Dan found a CG that had a chair in it, so he actually had to take her out of the chair she was actually in and put her in that chair. But it did turn out pretty good, so I'm glad you asked that. But, yeah, we're not in an airplane there. Well, we are in an airport. Earlier in the shot, we are actually in an airport when we did the airport shot. But the airliner shot, yeah, that is the other green screen shot in the film.
Yeah, because that's really amazing. Because I couldn't tell. I was looking. I was like, obviously, what's out the window is CG. Not CG, but
Yep.
green screen composited. But I was like, is she really on an airplane? Because it looked like she's really sitting in the chair. You had a couple of different angles of her, and I was like, oh, so that's very clean. If you shot that against.
Oh well, thank you, and I'll make sure I mention that to Dan because he spent some time on that, and like I said, we actually shot it in an airline chair, which made more work for him because he had to take her out of the chair. We could have just had her sitting on a stool. But it turned out pretty well, and thank you for asking that. I will let Dan know that you enjoyed that shot.
I definitely did.
And on a side note, for me personally, this was the hardest one for me to keep track of wardrobe with because when you have uniforms, it's easy. We had about 50 different wardrobe changes in this.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. You credit Kat Roberts as doing your wardrobe. Is that correct?
Nope. Her daughter, Emma. Emma helps with picking wardrobe, and she does make some costumes at points. The costume that most people would like that she made, she's been with me from day one as well. She made all the Orion slave costumes in my Mud episode.
Oh.
When she's not here, I do call her and say, this is the scene we're doing. What should I be looking for? Sometimes she'll send me a photograph or something because I have no taste in clothes at all. I wear blue jeans and a T-shirt. But, yeah, she's my consultant and has made things as well. And her mom then is a consulting producer for me because she goes over some of the film, lets me know angles and stuff that she likes because I like to get other people's opinion too because I have a picture in my head of what I think it should look like, but that's not always the best. So I try to get several people's perspective, and I like to get perspective of people who weren't there at the shoot either, so they don't know how hard it was to get a shot. Because if I do a really hard shot, I want to use it, but if it doesn't look right, then we're not going to use it.
By the way, what I realized is that I saw consulting producer, and I read that as costuming producer, Kat Roberts. So that was my mistake. But I actually had no idea that her daughter was producing your wardrobe.
Yeah. I think that's her ambition is to get into Hollywood, I believe, and do some kind of wardrobe and and seamstress work there. So, and, they've also been with me, I'm sure, from the beginning. His name is Mud. They were all in that one.
Yeah.
So,
for those folks who don't know Kat Roberts, by the way, she has been with many, many different fan films. She was Janice Rand in Star Trek New Voyages, and the reason that she got that job, and she also was Janice Rand in The Red Shirt Diaries. And the reason that she got that is she had her own beehive wig that she had made, which was uncanny. If you've ever seen Kat Roberts without the wig, you would not recognize her.
Well, she's a personal friend of mine, so yes.
Well, you would. I'm talking about people who are listening to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's she's been all around fan films as well. I'm glad she hasn't gone too far.
Yeah, she loves doing this stuff. I met her down at Continues is where I met her. So.
Yeah, she was also on Star Trek Continues. It sounds like you've got a great year. It looks like you had maybe about 20 or 30 people involved in this.
Oh, I had at least that many in extras. I actually did a count right after this came out. Over the course of my films I've made, have over 200 different people in front of the camera. But, yeah, this one actually the smallest main cast. I think I had 7 speaking parts, and probably, if I counted up the credits, there's probably 30 or so people involved in this particular one.
I think a lot of people out there don't realize how many people it takes to make even what looks like a quote-unquote simple fan film like yours,
sure.
Which is
and this
so
one
simple.
was simple. It definitely was. Of the films I made, this was the simplest one to do because, not too many speaking parts, not a lot of different sets. But, this was probably the simplest one to produce. But still, I wish I had maybe 5 more people on my crew to assist because I'm still doing, 5 jobs.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are doing multiple jobs, including your partner, Dan, and Dan's wife, Kelly.
Oh, yeah, Dan is amazing.
And Kelly's amazing. Don't forget to say that, too.
Oh, yeah. And actually, she's going to step up on the sequel to this and do a lot more work on it's not really a sequel, but, it's along the same timeline. So, but, yeah, she's very excited. She read the script the other day and, called me up and couldn't say enough good things about it. And she's going to really step up and do a lot of work on it because she read it and she just thought it was amazing. So hopefully it'll turn out as well as this one because I was very pleased with this one. So we'll see. But, yeah, she's very excited, which is why we're shooting already because she wanted to get rolling on it right away.
So I'm very excited about this, too. So are you going to be able to start filming this with everybody sheltering at home? Or
we're filming now, yeah.
So you're filming now?
We are filming now. The way we're doing it, and the way we did this one as well, was there was never more than 5 people on set at one time because of the way it was written. And so the follow-up to this is also written where we can shoot most of it without having, as a matter of fact, the next one will be no crowd scenes at all. So I'll never have more than 10 people at one time anywhere in the next one. So we're shooting all the one shots out. And then after we know that we've got all the lines down, then we're going to shoot the establishing shot last. That way everyone is polished and knows their line and knows their marks. And then we can just get people together for their shots. But I don't think I have a single shot that has more than 4 people in it for the next one. I would like to say that on this particular film, usually Dan is my MVP. Buddy Campbell was my MVP on this film because a lot of things go on behind the scenes that no one knows about. But I basically lost 2 actors about less than a week before shooting. And because he's in the acting community, he actually brought in Roberta Lincoln and Ariel with less than a week prep time. He got them for me, which is why he's credited as the casting person on this one because he really, we had a timeline and he saved the timeline because I had people who then, for various reasons, had committed and then things changed in their life and they couldn't make it.
Yeah, and these things do happen, as I now know myself. But the people you had taking over, I think they did a really great job.
I agree. I like them very much. I can't say I like them better than who I originally cast, but I had also not filmed the people I originally cast, so I might have gotten better performances. I'm not sure, but I'm certainly pleased with what I got. And Janice was a trooper, and for her to come in and hopefully this was portrayed correctly. She comes in pretending to be, a little bit losing her mind, and then, ultimately she comes in and corrects what she thinks needs to be correct. So she's definitely fooled the detectives into thinking maybe she's a little bit crazy, and her character actually is still of sound mind, still working undercover. So anyway, I hopefully that was portrayed correctly, because that Roberta character was key to the whole thing. And honestly, when I first wrote this, it was going to be her funeral that they were attending, and I had to rewrite, not because it necessarily would have been a problem, but I then, in my research, found out that there was a comic book series where she lived for another 10 years past now, so I didn't want to necessarily conflict with what some people may have known if they were reading the comic book.
Well, I very much appreciate you keeping canon or extended canon consistent.
Yeah, I try, and of course, some of it conflicts, but when I saw that there was a whole comic book series about it, I'm like, yeah, I probably should just alter that a little bit.
Well, personally, I wouldn't have noticed one way or the other, but I'm sure that there are some canon Nazis out there who are very, very happy that you did that.
Well, I'm trying to make them happy, and so I'm happy with it, and it worked out better for me, I think, having the connection to Faith Garland in it more so. It gave me more freedom to really go after that Roswell thing. So.
Well, all in all, Glenn, another sterling example of the quality Star Trek fan filmmaking that is coming out of Arkansas.
Thank you.
And we definitely look forward to more Federation Files. At this point, do you see Federation Files as ultimately having an end point where you just kind of walk away and you're done, or are you just going to keep doing this until you're dead?
Well, my wife would like me to say this is it, but quite honestly, I was done 2 years ago until, all of that happened. When Walking Bear was done, I was done. But because of the situation now, I feel like I need to keep going. And honestly, I have 12 more scripts. I doubt we're gonna do 12 more, but I don't have an end in sight right now. Obviously, things could change tomorrow. I think I'll probably keep going until Dan Reynolds doesn't want to do it anymore, because I can't do it without him.
There you go.
Unless there's some whiz kid editor out there that wants to come and put in 40 hours a week for free to edit my films. I'm really dependent on Dan.
And I'm sure he's dependent on you.
Yeah, we have mutual respect for each other, because I'm kind of the logistics guy that makes the filming part happen, and then he's the whiz that actually makes it look like an episode. So we work very well together. We have different strengths, and they play to each other, and I couldn't be happier.
On Trill, we call that symbiosis.
That's true.
Well, thank you again, Glenn, for your time today, and best of luck with the Federation Files.
Thank you so much, and I am looking forward to your film as well. Hopefully we'll see that soon.
Hopefully so. Keep your fingers crossed.
I will. Thank you so much.
Take care, Glenn.